our last session, we ended with the case of someone who was a mitkaven. They intended to do something, and in that case to kill, but they didn't hit the target they thought they were going to. Our Mishnah continues with the theme of people who are doing inherently hazardous activities, but which are also completely lawful. What do we expect in terms of safety precautions from the people who are doing this activity? And what is the expectation of passers-by to protect themselves and to practice caution? Hazorek even lirashut harabim veharag. Someone who casts a stone into the rashut harabim, the public domain, veharag, and they killed, harei ze goleh. That person goes into galut. And then Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov clarifies and says, Im mi cheshe yatzata ha'even miyado. If after the rock has already left his hand, hotzi hala, that guy, the victim, produced et rosho, his head, vikibla, and accepted it, meaning I, the zorek, the killer, I've already thrown the rock. And after the rock has left my hand, and when I was throwing the rock, there was nobody there, but then pop, the victim's head comes mid-rock in flight, okay, and encounters the rock. In that case, harei ze patur. Then the person who threw the rock is exempt and does not go into galut. The case of one who throws a stone can be seen in two ways. One is that this person is engaging in a crazy activity of playing football with stones. But as we'll see in the Gemara's analysis, it's probably more likely that what we are talking about is a case where a person is either in the process of a construction project or disposing of the debris. It's still a dangerous activity, a hard hat activity, but something a normal person would do without being considered reckless. This is complicated by the nature of the Rashut Harabim. On the one hand, it is a place where anyone can go, and therefore one has a reason to be cautious and aware that other people might be there. On the other hand, the Rashut Harabim also functions as the public dump. It is the appropriate place for one to be disposing of dangerous and hazardous materials. The first voice in the Mishnah, the Tana Kama, takes his cue from the Pasuk, which explicitly cites a rock as a potentially lethal weapon. When you are manipulating rocks, even in a permitted way, you need to be cautious, and you need to take responsibility for any accidents. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, however, understands that the Rashut Harabim lends itself to a scenario which is truly unforeseen. You looked around, and when you cast the stone, there wasn't anyone there. Only after the rock had left your hand, a point after which there is no return, then the victim appeared. In this scenario, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says you did your due diligence. Just as a person creating a hazardous situation needs to understand that what they are doing is dangerous, and they need to take the proper precautions, so too, someone who is walking through the public domain knows that it is a place where one can sustain injury, and they too need to proceed with caution. However, the Mishnah also assumes that on your own property, there is a reasonable assumption of no trespassing. Therefore, in your own chatzer, in your own courtyard, you can assume that no one else will be there without your explicit consent. Zarak et ha'even, not to the Rashut Harabim, but lechatzero, he cast the stone into his own chatzer, veharag, and it killed. Then we need to look at the victim. Im yesh reshut l'nizak likanes l'sham. If there is permission for the person who was injured to enter into there, then goleh, then the person who threw the rock, the owner of the courtyard, goes into galut. Okay, possibility 1 is I threw the rock into my own yard. Somebody was there and they were killed. If the victim had a right to be in my yard, which means that I had a reasonable assumption that somebody else might be there, then I, the person who cast the stone, even though I cast it in my own yard, I have to go into galut. Ve'im lav, but if the person who was damaged, the nizak, did not have my permission to be in my yard, therefore I could assume that there weren't any trespassers. If I, God forbid, kill them, eino goleh, he does not go into galut. I am not punished for the harm that was caused to the person who came into my yard without permission. Not because trespassing is a death penalty offense, but because the type of expectation that I would have would be that there isn't anybody there. And therefore, if somebody was there, I can't be held accountable. Shene'emar, as the verse says, Va'asher yavo et re'ehu bayar. And a case where he comes with his friend into the forest. Mahayar reshut lenizak ulemazik likanes l'sham. Just as a forest is a place where it is perfectly permissible for anyone to be there, both the nizak, the person who was damaged, and the mazik, the person who caused damage, they both have permission likanes l'sham, to enter into there. Similarly, af kol reshut lenizak ulemazik likanes l'sham. Similarly, any area where both the person who was the victim and the person who was the perpetrator had permission to be there, ... That is either the Rashut HaRabim, where everybody has permission, or the place where it was explicitly stated that the Nizak had permission to come there. Yatsa Chatzer Bal Habayit, that comes to exclude the case of the yard, the private property of a householder, She'ein Rashut Linizak Likanes L'sham, where the person who was hurt, the Nizak, did not have permission to enter. So why do we need this little detail of the forest? The Mishnah knows that the category of the agora, of the public market, and also the public dump, post-dates the Torah. But the concept of public access, that there are places where everyone has the right to enter, that is represented by the forest. In the pshat, in the plain understanding of the verse, the forest is cited because it's a place that's dangerous. It's a place where people brandish weapons to chop trees, to hunt. But the Mishnah uses this detail to ground the concept of Reshut HaRabim in the text of the Torah itself. Abba Shaul Omer, and then Abba Shaul pipes up and says, Ma chatavat etzim reshut, af kol reshut. Abba Shaul says, no. The significance of the forest is not the location of the forest, that it's a place where everybody can go into, but rather the significance is the action that is taking place in the forest, which is the chopping down of trees. Just as chopping down trees is an elective activity, af kol reshut, similarly, any elective activity would cause the person who killed to go into galut. Yatsa ha'av, this excludes the father hamakeh et beno, who is flogging his son, v'harav harodeh et talmido, and the teacher who is flogging their students, v'shaliach beitin, or an emissary of beitin. So just to be clear, what Abba Shaul is saying here is the paradigm of the forest, the paradigm of the cutting down of trees is to tell me that a person only goes into galut if they kill within the context of an elective activity. If the person is doing something that is violent, that is dangerous, but they are doing it because they must, because it is the context of a mitzvah, in that case, the person who killed would not go into galut. So the father who is striking their child, the teacher who is striking their student, the shaliach beit din who is striking someone who needs to comply with the orders of the court, if those people accidentally cause death through this hitting, through this flogging, those people would not go into galut. Abba Shaul is less concerned about the forest as a location where people have permission to be present or not be present. For Abba Shaul, the forest represents elective activities. There is no obligation to cut down trees. So the rules of galut only apply to elective acts that are dangerous or violent. However, corporal punishment is not considered by him to be elective. A parent, a teacher, a representative of Beit Din have an obligation to do their jobs, and that involves doing something violent. If this leads to a terrible result, God forbid, galut is not the consequence. We do not live in a world where it is considered necessary to routinely hit children. But I remember my grandfather asking me repeatedly, and he grew up not that many generations ago, how it was possible that my students listened to me since he knew that I did not beat them. Though the example may thankfully be less relevant, the principle behind it stands, and it is extendable to other scenarios where a violent act is considered to be necessary. What if you are breaking a car window in order to save a baby who is locked in the back seat? What if you are a surgeon? Abba Shaul acknowledges that not all violence is the same, and something done for recreation or to beautify one's property must be seen differently than an act which is dangerous, but ultimately necessary. The Gemara then picks up with the fundamental question about a case of one who is casting rocks into the public domain. Isn't this person a dangerous rock thrower who knows exactly what they are doing? And the Gemara's conclusion is that there actually can be found a vague enough scenario where one could not reasonably expect to hit someone, but you would still know that it was theoretically possible. We'll go through it piece by piece. Lirashut harabim, this person is throwing out stones into the public thoroughfare. Meizidhu, that person knows exactly what they are doing. They are doing something intentionally. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak. So Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak says, well, actually, this person is doing something lawful. Bisoter et kotalo. This person is dismantling their wall. And therefore, they're not a crazy rock thrower just casting stones into the public domain. They are moving construction debris into the public thoroughfare. And then the Gemara responds, but wait a minute. Just because what you're doing is lawful doesn't mean you don't have to be careful. Ibai le li'iyune. He needs to look. He needs to see what he's doing. And then we say, bisoter et kotalo balayla. This is a scenario where he's doing this construction project at night. Since it's nighttime, he doesn't have to look. What would he see? It's pitch black out. And then we say, balayla nami ibai le li'iyune. What are you talking about? Nighttime is not an excuse. Even if it is happening at night, balayla, nami also, ibai le li'iyune, he needs to look and make sure that there's nobody there who could be struck by the stone. And then we say, okay, maybe it's bisoter et kotalo la'ashpa. This person is destroying their wall in order to take it to the dump. A dump is not an occupied place. It's occupied by garbage. But we have to figure out exactly what kind of ashpa we are talking about. We are fortunate enough to live in a time of plumbing. But back in the day, if you had to do your business and you were out and about, you would go to the ashpa, you would go to the public landfill, and that is where you would do your business. Okay? So just because it's the landfill doesn't mean that there's nobody there. So we have to ask the question, Hi ashpa hechidami. What are we talking about here when we're talking about this landfill? If it's a popular place to go to the bathroom, there are a lot of people who are found there. Shechiach is an interesting word and can be very confusing because the word lishkoach in Hebrew means to forget, but the verb shin chaf chet in Aramaic means to find. So shechiche ba'rabim means there are lots of people that are found in it. So let's go back. Hi ashba hechidami. What does this dump look like? Shechiche ba'rabim, if it is a very popular bathroom spot and many people are found there, posheahu, he is criminally negligent. La shechichi ba'rabim, but if there aren't a lot of people there, anusu, how could he have been expected to know that there was going to be a person there? He is totally innocent. It was out of his control. He's anus. Amar Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, no, we need this case. La tricha ella, it is only required for the case where it is an ashpa ha'asuya lipanot ba balayla ve'ein asuya lipanot ba bayom. It's the kind of place where people go to the bathroom there during the night, but they don't go to the bathroom there during the day. Ve'ika de mikre, and sometimes it happens, ve'yativ, that somebody will go and sit there. Okay, it's during the day. You're not expecting a person to go to the bathroom there, but sometimes it happens that a person has to go to the bathroom. Poshea lo have, we wouldn't say that the rock thrower is criminally negligent. Deha ena asuya lipanot ba bayom, because people don't usually go to the bathroom there during the day. Ones nami lo have, but it's also not completely out of his control. Deha de mikre viativ, because indeed it does happen that sometimes people go and sit there. So on the one hand, you're looking at this Gemara and you're looking at Rav Papa's conclusion and you're thinking to yourself, this is preposterous, right? There's this scenario where it's a dump and people are going to the bathroom and they don't go to the bathroom during the day, and then they do go to the bathroom sometimes during the day, and that's a scenario that we're talking about. And I would say to you, yes, that is a scenario that we're talking about. The Mishnah, through the eyes of the Gemara, is trying to find this case where it's truly accidental. If nobody is ever supposed to be there, then you are anus. Then if somebody comes there, it's a freak accident and it cannot be attributed to your negligence. There's no way to call it your fault. But if you know that somebody is going to be there, then you are mezid. You have to assume that someone is going to be there, that there is a possible victim, and therefore, even if you're not intending to kill, since a dangerous result is so likely, you need to anticipate it. So the Gemara says, Rav Papa concludes with, most accidents happen in this sweet spot, where it's not likely, but it's possible. And the lesson that the Gemara is teaching you is you need to be concerned not only with the scenarios that are likely, but the scenarios that are possible. When we are trying to assess risk, we don't only look at what is the most likely outcome. We need to look at what are all of the possible outcomes and how can we mitigate risk and damage in all of those situations. In the next session, we are going to be skipping ahead all the way to 9b, the first Mishnah on the page, that discusses the category of a person who does not see. We often pronounce this as suma. It's actually properly pronounced as someh. What do we do with a person who maybe can't be expected to look around and see what the risks are because the person cannot see? We are going to evaluate this and other possible categorical exemptions from the penalty of galut in the next session.